Alrighty, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us. You know what I would actually really love to do? I
What?
would love for us to set our intention for this episode. It's something that I like to
Ooh.
do with my couples. It's something I like to do with myself before every session. And also right before I go to the store, I set my intention. So LA, just kidding.
So
But
LA.
yeah, let's just set our intention. What do you want this 30 minutes to be in our space? What are you wanting?
Okay, so I think I'm wanting to bring some clarity to things that maybe feel complex
Oh,
and to help people find words for things that they experience that we don't have the words for.
I love that. I love that. I think that I want to add to that authenticity and, to your point, genuine expression. And I think so much of the time, that's where true growth is, when we're able to resonate with something that feels truthful and honest about our own maybe internal world.
Yes.
And we're kind of bringing the internal into the external.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
into our grasp. So love that. Well, talk about an intention right there.
Yeah. So, let's see.
Well, maybe we could also start with how we met,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good starting spot.
Yeah.
So, it was a fall
1949. It was a fall summer
It was
day.
back in the day. I remember we were in grad school,
Yeah.
and oh man, I mean, there was orientation, but it was kind of a blur. But then
It was. I don't even remember orientation, but I do remember sitting next to Kian, and I was, it was like law and ethics, and then I think we were in like family systems. And luckily, I found you. Luckily, we found each other. I don't know if he would say that, but I know for me,
no, absolutely.
he was the humor amidst the storm, because there was so much information that we were processing as young therapists, and like just being in school and trying to integrate so much information, but also having, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I didn't have a whole lot of healing going on. I came into the field, into psychology, just thinking, well, I give really good advice, so obviously I should be a therapist. And it was a very humbling experience. And I think sitting next to somebody so special as Kian, which, not many of you know, and maybe you do from Kian's page, but he has such a tender heart. And it's such a beautiful balance of having this tenderness. And I think we just really found the humor in the pain.
100%, because it was just like so intense. And I remember we would be laughing in the back of class, and taking like just taking like interesting perspectives and sharing them with each other. And then like you said, it's like it's nice when you find somebody who's just as goofy and funny and doesn't take life too seriously. And here we are in this like trauma, informed program. It's like trauma, like all the time,
Right.
And it's like we were both kind of figuring out our own way and trying to understand, our individual journey. And it's just a kind of a blast to go back and think of what it was like, just sitting there and, oh my God, I think I was like deeply disconnected, dissociated, unconscious of so many things, but just so like shut down, and just like, we even joked about it, like just like, we're like, yeah, like our bodies were just like tense and shells. Yeah.
I was stuck in my fawn response. If we really look at that, I was stuck in fawn response. I was constantly submitting in relationships, and I was still really in unconscious patterns from my family dynamics. It was all about appeasing, approval, and perfection for me in that space. And so there was a lot of unearthing that I think was happening, and still continues to happen as well. Yeah.
No, like 100%. I feel the same. Like I was definitely in the fawn response. Just people pleasing. How can I regulate other people's nervous systems around me?
Yes.
Growing up, I grew up in a single parent family home, and before that I had to kind of navigate, my dad and some of his challenges and just kind of thinking back on it. It's like we even joke about how like regulating other people's nervous systems is where we started, right? When we were like, 7, 6,
maybe
5,
even younger.
I don't even know.
Right.
But that's where the training is. That's where it, where it begins.
It's funny. We talk a lot about like software, right? And our software and our early programming. And one of the things that I think we're really talking about is early onset codependency. And there's a really great book. It's called The Drama of the Gifted Child. And that is something that was a game changer for me in really understanding how part of my survival skills growing up as a young little infant was to recognize when my mother didn't have the capacity, right? And so there's something to say about our world and the stressors that are happening. And we can all speak to that in so many different ways, but how, and we're kind of sliding into our topic so naturally, which I love, but how that the neurobiology of attachment essentially, and how we learn early on how to either choose self, I'm going to regulate myself, or I'm going to regulate the person in front of me because I need them to survive. And so many of us are caught in that loop and are still engaging that in relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And I will also say, like, thinking back on, looking at my parents and specifically my mom having to navigate everything that was put on her. From my experience as a kid, right, I'm able to look at it and kind of see, okay, I learned to regulate other people's nervous systems because my mom was in a very difficult relationship and she had a lot of pressure put on her. And I love what you said about capacity earlier because it's so true, right? And when you kind of look at your parents from a lens other than what could they have done differently as a parent to me, but if you can start to look at them as a child and look at them as, what was it outside of the role that they had in your life?
Right.
They're a multifaceted person, right? And so we can start to kind of unlock some of that compassion that we need for not only ourselves, but for them and also ourselves.
I think that's such a intricate dance that we have to play too, because on some level, and I can speak to it from my journey and some of my clients that I've worked with, and I know for you as well with your clients, there's the grief journey, right? And that's allowing ourselves to grieve and be upset by the lack of needs that were potentially fulfilled growing up. And there's a journey in that of rebellion, sometimes of anger, right, of bitterness, of resentment, and all of that is valid.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes, and for me, it took me years. I really was crawling through so many of those stages of grief for a really long time because it kept showing up in my relationships. And one of the things that I've now been able to reach, and I would say I've probably been in this experience for about 10 years, is about a decade's worth of work in saying, you know what, I can understand and appreciate and love what my parents could do with all they had. And the and I think is very important. And I still feel like there was so much more.
Yes.
Right? Yes. That's really difficult to navigate because there's some people where there isn't the and. And there may not even be space for the and because of so much of the lacking. And I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on that in terms of how you navigate that with clients, figuring out if they want to estrange from their family, or if this is more of a grief journey? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say, like, my thoughts on the whole estrangement thing is really going back to looking at the black and white thinking.
Right.
And so with black and white thinking, right, it does come from trauma, and our brain is telling us, right, this is safe and this is unsafe. And I think it's so beautiful, right, and important that you bring in the and, because we're holding space for two things, right? Grieving what wasn't there and the integration of that, right, as well as acknowledging here's what was within their capacity.
Right.
And, if I think of myself and put myself in the position of my parent, I often wonder, right? Like, what would it be like to have to manage all their responsibilities and then have enough capacity, especially in tough times, right, for my child?
I think of when I hear you say tough times, I think trauma response, right?
Yeah.
Like when I'm in a tough time, majority of my brain is saving the energy that it needs in order to survive. I'm not going to have access to fine attunement, right? Like in those moments. So if I'm just trying to survive, if I'm trying to put food on the table, if I'm, at risk of losing a job, or I don't have a babysitter, whatever the case may be, right? I'm not going to be thinking, oh, look at little Billy. Oh, that's really interesting. He's being really creative. I don't have the capacity. I can't even see little Billy right now.
Yes.
All I can see is, how am I going to make it through one more week? How am I going to make it through this shift? Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. And I'm glad you bring that up too, because, we often, if you think in the black and white terms, right, it's very much the brain categorizing, right, things. And where I find the most healing is when we're in the gray area and when we can see, like, what you can see, right, allows you to have compassion for a parent that maybe wasn't there fully. And then, of course, we've talked about this earlier, but when, you're in a situation where there's danger or a threat to your life, or, your nervous system is so shot and burnt out, and you have adrenal fatigue, and you notice that constant output is not giving you enough safety to function, then we're seeing the reasons why people pull back, the reasons why we have estrangement, right? Because we have to be conscientious of the fact that there are, a lot of people out there that their nervous system has kind of the response that's almost like primal. Like you're around a bear,
right,
and there's rage and anger and terror and fear and dysregulation and disruption. And what are you going to do around a bear, right? What is your body going to do? It's going to tense up. You're going to run away. You're going to fight, flight, freeze, like that whole response system. And that keeps you in the sympathetic. And so if we're looking at relationships where people are constantly in the sympathetic and there's no space for any kind of regulation, we see the reasons why those relationships end up being pulled apart.
Right.
And even not just essentially, pulled apart in the way of like, I'm no longer going to speak to this person, but dissected, right? And really looked at and examined. And you see children looking at, this is the relationship I have with my parent.
Right.
Here's where my needs are not getting met.
Right.
Here's where their capacity is. And also looking at your own autonomy as an individual, right? And so what are your thoughts on that?
Gosh, there's so many there's so many little gold mines, right, that I'm hooking into. And one of the things that I think about, you said sympathetic, and I think it's important for us to just highlight, we have sympathetic nervous system and we have our parasympathetic nervous system, right? And so when Kian's talking about that bear, right, and we have the rage, the sympathetic nervous system response is when we're on high alert, right? That's when you are paying attention to every cue. That's going to look like anxiety, we might say. That's going to look potentially like agitation, irritation, right? Those are all symptoms of anxiety also. But what I want to kind of take out the psychopathology a little bit and stop pathologizing, but I think anxiety is a word that we use very, very commonly, and I think we just kind of throw it out there. But what we're really talking about is dysregulation. And when I think of anxiety, I think of prepare, I think of plan, and I think of predict, right? Those are the functions: prepare, plan, and predict. And so if I can prepare and I can plan and I can predict, I can keep myself safe. And so we have somebody that's on edge. So I think it'd be good for us to break down that sympathetic, right? If we have a parent that's constantly in sympathetic response, it's going to be really intense. And so what does that do to somebody else's nervous system when you're around a bear, right? This is just a different kind of bear. This is a bear in the real world experience. So let's just talk about that a little bit. When we have a parent that's showing up constantly in their sympathetic nervous response, what do we see the child going into?
Yeah, that's such a good point. We'll see the child really going into that people-pleasing state, right? And that's really just a minimization of the self.
Yes.
It's almost like a self-erasure, right? And when I think about anxiety, and I love that, Gail and I kind of are on the same page with this, is that, we look at psychology, look at the field of psychology, there's a lot of pathologizing. There's a lot of saying, here's the problem, here's the diagnosis, and here's the treatment for that diagnosis. And when we really pull that away and we look at the humanness of a person's system, right, and how they're functioning, that's where we get to that deep healing.
Yeah.
And when we think about a child who was in the space of people-pleasing, they were compliant. And we are taught in society that a child who is compliant is emotionally healthy, that they're a good boy or a good girl, like that they do the right thing. And really what compliance is really just that going back to that self-erasure. It's the marker of a child that is unhealthy. It's the marker of a child that
is undifferentiated.
Yes, and can't express themselves authentically.
No boundaries.
Can't have or take up space, right? They have to minimize themselves. That's why we see a lot of shame. Shame is a minimization of the self. It's making yourself small and non-threatening, right? And sometimes if we look at how people can shame themselves, that is part of that automatic trauma response of there's the bear, and if I minimize myself and I become as non-threatening, yes, exactly, preemptively. So I think what you were kind of bringing up makes me think about prediction error in the brain.
Oh, yes.
And
Our favorite.
And then anxiety, right? And anxiety is really just a bunch of predictions in the brain that are giving us different vantage points of what could go wrong. And when we look at anxiety and something that's commonly used, like that phrase, it's such a nebulous thing.
It really is.
Right? And so we like to bring that brain health aspect to it. Like, what's happening in the brain when you actually experience anxiety? What's happening up there? What are the different parts of the brain that are being affected? These are the types of conversations that can be really liberating for people.
Right, and I love that so much because I think about it, it's almost like we're unzipping.
Yes.
We're unzipping the layers and we're going deeper than the diagnosis. We're going deeper than the symptoms. And one of the things that I think about a lot is the symptoms are just the physical manifestations of the brain's way of trying to navigate the remembered past.
Yes.
Right? So let's talk a little bit about the remembered past, because I think that so much of what we're talking about is if I have the remembered past in my mind, I will be searching or I will be collecting evidence for the remembered past. And if the remembered past is dangerous, right? And we have a tendency to hold on to more of those dangerous cues, right? We think of the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. It's kind of their jobs, right? I like to think of them as like the secretaries and they're collecting data and they're collecting information. And if they're getting that information and they're saying, oh no, we need to remember this. This is the ASAP. We need to pass that up to the amygdala.
Yes.
We're screwed, right? Like
similar to Inside Out. It makes me think about the scenes there. But yeah, like that idea of how we retain information and store memories in our brain is really important when we're kind of breaking down these prediction errors and anxiety and things like this.
Right. And so it's so much more illuminating, I think, for clients. And let's take out the word clients and let's just say like humans in general, because I think that's what we're in the field of. It's human development, and I think it's conscious awareness. That's kind of the thing that I think that we're aiming to bring into the world is just more of a conscious awareness of themselves.
Yes.
Right? Less of other people and more of self. because that is what I'm learning in my own personal journey is bring it back to you, Gail, bring it back to you. And it doesn't have to be selfish in order for my attention to be more on my nervous system than it is to be on soothing somebody else's nervous system.
Yes, yes. And you brought up earlier we're looking at the sensory present and the remembered past. And oftentimes, right, in our nervous system, we are inundated with the sensory,
Right.
not the sensory present, we're inundated with the remembered past. And so the remembered past is really the thing that a lot of people live in. They just live in the remembered past. Their nervous system lives there. Their body lives there. They're still reacting to things that happened in the past. Right. And so when we bring in the sensory present, we're starting to ground the body. We're starting to show the body that this is now and that was then.
Mm-hmm. This is safe.
This is safe, exactly.
This is safe.
And it's that integration of the remembered past and the sensory present that we find that safety, right? Because we're not dismissing the remembered past. It's there for a reason. It's there to protect us.
You need to honor it, right?
Exactly. We need to honor it.
But I think what we're really saying is being able to be consciously aware of when that is our lens.
Yes.
If that's the only lens, right? Like if that's my prescription that I'm looking through my life, my relationships through is through my remembered past, then, excuse my French, but I'm screwed. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not going to be good for my partner, and that's not going to be good for me, because my remembered past is going to be subconsciously tied to what I believe about relationships. And so let's go into that a little bit. If I believe that people leave, if I believe that I'm unworthy of love unless I am working for it, if I believe that, I don't know, what are a couple other ones? Like, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I'm not enough. I mean, we have a whole list, right?
So many.
Of cognitions, but we all have, I would say, at least about 5 to 10 that you're pretty aware of. I would say we're pretty aware of, because if you're ever getting triggered, that's usually going to be an underlying trigger underneath, is that you've had a true belief system has come up in a relationship or at work, or something is coming up that is connecting to something that you have learned to believe about the world. And so our remembered past is about collecting data that highlights those beliefs about self or others, which make it really difficult for people to connect when they're giving you something different than what you expect.
Yes. And if your nervous system is wired to anticipate certain things, right? Like being let down, if repeatedly your nervous system has had the input that I'm going to be let down when I'm vulnerable, what do you think is going to happen, right? There's going to be, this is going to result in individuals who grow up and then become hyper independent. There's no room for interdependence. There's no room for anything other than I've got my back. I've got myself, right? And pushing everyone else away. I also like to use a lot of reframing, right? I know you do too. And this idea of instead of saying I and taking on almost like the traits of whatever it is you're experiencing, you can start to begin to say my brain. And so like with anxiety, for example, my brain is showing me threats that are no longer there. My brain is reacting to things that, feel unsafe. And then we're separating ourselves from this identity loop. The identity loop of I have this, I have anxiety, I have depression, and of course these are real things.
But they become overgeneralizations about self.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we're stuck.
Exactly. Because if they become too much of our identity and we don't separate our brain from who we are as people, we don't get to see the unique function our brain has and how we can almost like intercept our brain when it's looking for the same patterns. Because remember, as human beings, we have patterns, and we're a species of habit, and when we really boil it down and look at the bare bones of everything, we operate in a lot of those patterns. That's how we focus. That's how we concentrate. That's how we build the world around us, awareness. And so one of those things that really is enlightening is when you become consciously aware of the patterns that you have that you were not consciously aware of before. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, look at that, Gail. Yeah, I would say that's something that I do quite often with the individuals that I work with. And one of the things that I would say I end most of my sessions with is, let's have you just notice that. Right? Like, I just want you to notice it. I don't want you to change it. I think there's a lot of pressure to change these things. And I think once we naturally just start to become aware, oh, yep, my brain did it again. Oh, yep, I can totally see why I did that, because my brain thought that this was a bear and it really wasn't a bear moment. Right? And I just think that there's so much freedom in, and I think what we're also talking about is having a metacognitive experience. So if I'm looking at something and I'm pulling out from over here, I'm exploring it, and I'm gonna borrow from Kian's word, I'm gonna take a new vantage point of it. And I'm going to kind of extricate myself from this reaction that I'm having, knowing that it doesn't actually have to be this big reaction.
Yes. And that's where we go into down regulation.
Well, perfect timing. We're at sympathetic. Now let's kind of talk about down regulating.
Yes.
And kind of moving into that parasympathetic response.
Yes. So we're looking at rest and digest, right? When you are in the parasympathetic, your body is at ease. Your muscles are relaxed. You're not stressed. A lot of people don't know, but when you are eating, right, that's when you are in the rest and digest. And a lot of people know that part, but they don't know that when you're eating, that's the time that your body is not in fight or flight. And every other time that you're not eating, your body is in that fight or flight. This is for trauma survivors, right? And so when trauma survivors are in that space, right, they go into adrenal fatigue, they run into things that like high cortisol levels. And so this idea of eating protein first thing in the morning, right, is so important. I've learned this from My Nourished Belly on Instagram's Ashley. She's got
wonderful.
She's got a wonderful like page on all this incredible resources. Very trauma informed. Gut health and talking about how hormones are processed in the gut. And these things are really important. And so when we look at being in parasympathetic, we're really looking at that down-regulated state. And this is where we're in that place that is very similar to a mother and a child, right? Where the child surrenders to the mother, the mother's protection, the mother's safety. And we see this in the ventral vagal state. And so why don't you explain kind of the basics of the parasympathetic from your lens?
Right. So it's interesting because I do think that you and I have similar takes and also different experiences with it. So when I think of the parasympathetic nervous system response, I find that people sometimes get stuck in the parasympathetic. And so I kind of see sympathetic as more on edge, right? High alert, a little bit more anxious. And when I think of parasympathetic, I think of freeze. I think of paralysis, shut down, right? And I think I'm maybe working, when I'm looking at that parasympathetic, I'm really looking at it from that trauma response, not necessarily in the rest and digest. And so I think what we're talking about is there's kind of gradations. Like if we're looking at sympathetic and parasympathetic on a spectrum, I'm looking at the far end of the spectrum where I think you're really talking about the more healthy state, the more regulated state of the rest and digest, where I see a lot of the parasympathetic individuals or individuals in parasympathetic look like they have depression, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of lethargy. We might find some like binge eating, right, as a coping mechanism to potentially get somebody out of the sympathetic and put themselves into the parasympathetic to kind of numb out, to kind of numb some of those feelings. So I do think it's really interesting to look at process addictions, right? And when I think of process addictions, I think about something that gives us peace for the moment, but creates a false sense of regulation, right? And so when we think about if I'm like reaching for my phone, right? And I need to come out of the sympathetic nervous system response, I'm going to reach for my phone and I'm going to scroll, and that's going to take me down to the parasympathetic. I might start to disassociate. I'm really slowing down my system. And so that's one thing that I love to have, for myself as well, but my clients to think about, am I in sympathetic? Am I in parasympathetic? And where's my window of tolerance? Where do I want to be? What's a place where I feel calm, but alert, right? Engaged, but regulated. And I think we all have to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. Getting to that baseline is so important. And I think when I work with clients, I like to help them figure out, okay, where do I feel most safe? What is that baseline for me? Do I feel most safe when I'm in control of something? Do I feel most safe when I'm allowing someone to lead me? Do I feel most safe, when I'm kind of yielding or trusting the other person? Or do I feel more safe taking on that leadership role? And so some of those things, right, go into the topic of polarity.
So interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I could definitely tell you it's when I'm in control. And I get like, there's so many answers that I think tell a story, right?
Yes.
And each of these tell a story about, our programming, right?
Yes.
And you're going into polarity, right? So polarity in the dynamic, polarity in the relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that idea of polarity is so, it's something that maybe people don't talk about a lot, but we all know about relationships. We all know about attachment styles. At least a lot of us do.
The nerds.
Yeah, the nerds of psychology. Anyone who follows an Instagram page that has, something on mental health has probably run into a post about attachment styles.
Right.
And when I look at attachment styles, I like to look at how does one regulate? If we really look at just how does one regulate, we're going back to the nervous system baseline. What is their baseline of functioning? How do they feel most safe?
Right.
And so if we look at how someone with, if we look at it in terms of attachment style lens, someone with avoidant attachment style, they might regulate through distance, right? Regulating through distancing is how they feel most safe.
Right.
And you look at somebody who has an anxious attachment style.
Right.
They regulate through closeness,
yes.
right? So, and oftentimes this is the polarity that we see in a lot of couples, right? And so you wonder why there's, challenges, right? Because on one hand, this is how my nervous system has been primed in my upbringing. This is what feels most safe and at a baseline is to pull away, distance and self-regulate, and then come back once regulated.
And if I'm on the other end, and let's say I have an attachment or I have an anxious attachment, you leaving will stir up all of my abandonment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so potentially I'm going to be pulling you in preemptively because my brain plans, predicts, and I forget what the other one was. Assesses. Yeah, it's another P one. We don't know what it is, but it's constantly preparing. It's preparing for that, and so that's going to change the polarity because if I'm anticipating you pull away, then I'm going to potentially shift into a different position.
Absolutely.
and will not allow for the natural polarity.
Right.
So what I'm kind of hearing you say is there is something that's actually very natural and kind of healthy in that push-pull dynamic, but not the toxic push-pull.
Yeah,
I think there's
yeah.
a difference between the natural polarity.
Right. There is. And I think it's about acknowledging where your partner is at. What is their regulation style, right? Because if their regulation style is to pull away and they distance themselves and that's how they regulate their nervous system, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That is just how they currently operate. That is how their system has been wired.
It's their iOS.
It's their operating system. But yeah, so that idea, right, that we see a lot of like avoidant push-pull and how toxic it is, but if the person on the other end who's in the anxious attachment style, they learn that, oh, my partner is just needing to distance to self-regulate. This doesn't mean rejection. This doesn't mean, they hate me or they're pulling away because they don't want me, to be around them.
Right.
That's not always the case. Of course, there are some situations, right, where that might be the case. But if we start to look at that avoidant attachment as regulation, we're not going to demonize it as much, right? We're not gonna throw the flamethrower on it, right, so to speak. We're gonna have a little bit more compassion, a little bit more understanding, and then as the anxious person, if we choose to look at how we regulate, let's say that it's through closeness, right, and touch and connection. We may have been demonized for that ourselves, right?
Maybe being seen as like being too needy.
Yeah, too clingy.
Too clingy, too needy.
But really it goes back to the nervous system and how does that nervous system regulate? In the anxious person, it is going to be about preserving closeness. It is going to be about making sure that there's no abandonment cues. Right? And we look at like what was the
remembered past,
exactly.
Cue in remembered past.
1,000%. That remembered past. And so when we look at differentiation, we often look at it from the lens of like, differentiation from the family system.
Right.
We are systems. All of us are systems, right? A couple is a system. There are two systems within that system, but it is a system.
We are a system.
Right
now, we have a system that we're creating in here.
Exactly. And so when we look at that idea, we can pull it apart and understand it a little bit more and have a little bit more compassion instead of demonizing the person. Oh, this is how they're messed up. This is their problem. It's their trauma. When in reality, this is how their system was organized.
It's so funny. The word that keeps coming to my mind is strategy, right? Like what we're really talking about is this is how maybe your partner's brain created a strategy, a formula to navigate feelings, aka to navigate closeness, aka to navigate relationships.
Exactly.
And so if you can understand your own strategy as a strategy, and that every person in this world has their own nervous system strategy to regulate, that changes a lot of our experiences.
It changes everything.
Right.
Because ultimately we are, people that are relational. And relational dynamics are unconscious strategies.
Yeah.
And I love that you bring this up, right? Because it's so on the nose with this idea that how do we self-preserve?
Right.
And if we look at self-preservation, what is it that a child has to learn early on? They have to learn a strategy to survive within the environment that they're in.
iOS. System
Samsung
processing.
or Apple? That's the big question.
It depends on who's going to sponsor us.
Yeah, exactly. but that strategy, right?
Yeah.
And this is our strategy of putting in little tidbits there.
Yeah.
In case anyone's listening that could make an impact. But Yeah.
We probably have to wrap it up. I feel like we have done so well.
We have, I guess, the time kind of flies by. But I think
I'm like sad to end this here. But yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, if we kind of just want to wrap it up with a bow, I think the
Love
things,
bows.
Yeah, bows. The things we covered are, at the end of this that we really want to like take home, right? Some take home.
Yeah. Maybe questions.
Things that we can kind of further explore for next episode is, what kind of system are you in? What is the strategy to kind of take from your language, right? What is the strategy that
do I pull away?
Yes.
Do I go in closer?
Exactly.
Right.
And
my partner.
And how do I relate to the strategy that was there? And how do I not relate to it now? Maybe there's a shift, maybe there's a change, right? And I think the one great thing that can happen in these types of dynamics is a person who has a strategy can learn a new strategy. They can adapt to the strategy that they have now. For example, someone who maybe is distancing, the person who's in the anxious attachment style might see that as abandonment, but really it's just, my partner is distancing. That's how they regulate. That's how their system is wired, instead of the demonization.
Right. And I think it changes the whole conversation. And maybe that's something that we can talk about in our next episode is how do I then, so if I'm starting to recognize my strategies, right? How do I then communicate? How do I communicate with my partner in a way where I can say, hey, I can see that this is happening? Because I think that that's also a really difficult experience, right? We don't want to call somebody out, but we want to be able to say it in a loving way and be able to say, hey, I really notice every time we're intimate, you kind of pull away for a couple days.
Yes.
And I just want to better understand how you're kind of orienting to our relationship or whatever's happening between us. And I think we're kind of maybe we're getting into situationship territory. I don't know, right? But I think we are talking about how do we then recognize it within ourselves and then also be able to communicate it in a way that feels safe for another individual to engage in their own awareness process.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we can, maybe we could put our heads together and come up with like a strategy map or something that we could share, you know? But this idea of the strategizing and looking at it from a different lens can be really liberating. It can change everything about a relationship landscape.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, cheers to our first podcast.
Yes.
So glad to have you.
Cheers.
Have you joining us.
Yeah.
We'll be drinking tea next time and doing it again on a Monday. Look at us go.
Exactly. We're ready. We're excited for the new year.
Yeah.
And we're excited to have you join us.
Yeah. Maybe we can have you help you unravel some stories and strategies about yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Until next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.